Hey there, my friend. It's Dr. A from the Fit Father Project and the Fit Mother Project. You ever going through the supermarket and you see a food on a shelf and you wonder if it's healthy? It says it's gluten-free, soy-free, high in protein, but you're like, what's actually in this food? Well, it turns out the key is to look at the nutrition label. And I want to shoot this video because I think enough people don't know some of the intricacies of how to read nutrition labels properly. So in this video, what I want to do is break down some examples of going through some nutrition labels. You're going to look over my shoulder, we're going to be here on the computer, go through a bunch of different nutrition labels, and I'm going to teach you how to read these things properly. And along the way, I want to actually inject some of my personal philosophy on the things that I look for when evaluating food to see whether or not it's going to be something I want to put in my body to fuel me for energy, for fat loss, for muscle building, etc. So it's going to be a really great video. We're going to hop over to the computer here. Before we do, I want to talk really basically about some philosophy things when it comes to nutrition. What we want is we want high nutrient density foods. So foods that are high in a lot of the good things we want in our body, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, the amino acids, healthy carbohydrates, healthy fats. We don't want empty calories. So we all have the kind of example of something like broccoli, which has a lot of great phytonutrients, some proteins, some fiber, versus potato chips, which has a lot of calories, but not a lot of nutrition. So calorie density matters, not just kind of like the number of calories in a particular product. And I really love this quote from an author on health wellness named Michael Pollan. And basically he says that if your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize something as food, you probably shouldn't eat it. It's called the great-grandmother rule. I think there's a lot of wisdom in this approach, which basically says if a food needs a really long nutrition label for us to understand what it is, it might not be the best thing to put into our bodies. So we're going to see how that principle plays out as we evaluate these different nutrition labels. And that principle basically comes down to it's probably best for us to eat mostly non-processed foods. An apple's an apple, salmon is salmon, broccoli is broccoli. Now that microwavable healthy choice dinner with the nutrition label and the ingredient label that wraps all around the box, well, it gets a little complicated. So let's dive onto the computer. We'll cover some of these nutrition labels and I think you're going to learn quite a bit. So here on the screen right now, I just brought up a generic nutrition label for some crackers. So the first thing that our eyes are naturally drawn to when we look at a nutrition label is the calories. I mean, they even make the font really big. So it says 140 calories in this, but what does that actually mean? This means there's 140 calories per serving, and a serving size for this is 12 crackers. So we can deduce from this is basically each cracker we have is a little over 10 calories, and there are 6 servings per container. So 140 seems pretty low, 140 calories, that's not that much. But if we were to eat the whole box of this is well over 800 calories. So that's really important to keep into context. When we're looking at calories, we also need to look at what's the serving. And the reason this is important is because this is a big marketing ploy from a lot of companies. They basically make the serving size very small, smaller than you may reasonably eat, and that means the calories can look better than they actually are. So how many people actually eat 5 or 6 potato chips? Likely not. You might be eating on average 2, 3, 4 servings, so the calories aren't necessarily representative of what you might be intaking. So look at this, for example. This is a good example. This is a pizza right here. So 350 calories. Doesn't seem too bad. And this is one of those smaller, like personal size pizzas. Well, turns out 350 calories is only 1/3 of the pizza. So you eat this whole pizza, you are over 1,000 calories. So that's the true story here. Before we get there, let's hop back to the first image we had up here. So after we look at the calories, the next most important place that I believe is to look is actually to skip some of this stuff in here and head down to the ingredients. This is something that they typically hide at the bottom of these, or sometimes even in a different location than the nutrition label itself. And what I want to first teach you about the ingredients is they list the ingredients in proportion. So the first thing they list, that means that this cracker is mostly brown rice, and then it's mostly quinoa, and then mostly flax seeds. And in the very bottom, these are the least ingredients. So the things they list first are the things that it's mostly made up of. And as we go down the ingredients list, those make up a smaller proportion of that food. And anytime we're reading over an ingredients list, if we see things in brackets, that is telling us what's in the ingredient that's directly before. So here we see tamari, which is a kind of basically like a soy sauce. And inside the tamari is water, soybeans, salt, and vinegar. So that's what's inside tamari. And we're going to see this come into play when we're looking at things later, like some breads, for example. So the first ingredient here on this bread is enriched wheat flour. And then in parentheses, what is in enriched wheat flour? It's flour, malted barley flour, iron, niacin, some other vitamins, etc. So that's important to understand. 2 things with the ingredients. First off, ingredients are listed in their highest proportion. And second off, there are sub-ingredients inside there. And why is this important? Well, because when it comes to health and fitness, The ingredients matter as well as the calories. We've all heard the stories of people who go and eat McDonald's 3 Big Macs a day and lose weight. And this is absolutely true, and it does work because calories are a huge portion of weight loss. And if you're eating fewer calories than you're burning every single day, you can lose weight on McDonald's. But we all know intuitively that it's probably not the best option because alongside those calories in the Big Mac, you're getting a whole bunch of stuff like preservatives, microplastics in the meats, stuff they spray on the buns, and a lot of other garbage that is noted and documented to have adverse health effects over the long haul. So this is where we need to get into some of the intricacies of what other things do we see here on this food label. So first thing you'll see here is total fat. Back to the crackers, right? 4.5 grams, which gives you this 6% number. And this is 6% is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. That's not necessarily 6% of what you may need. You may need more, you may need less, depending on your goals, but that's the standard that they set these nutrition labels to. And then they break it out into different types of fat. They list saturated fat and they list trans fat. And saturated fat's gotten a very bad rap over, I'd say the last 20 years in nutrition. And it turns out from the research, saturated fat's not nearly as bad as we thought it was. In fact, a lot of foods that are high in saturated fat can be very healthy. And they actually can be totally fine for heart health in moderation, as long as we're getting right sources. But the problem, the worst kind of fat is definitely trans fat. And trans fat is typically found in processed foods. And what it does is it raises LDL cholesterol, which we typically call bad cholesterol, although there's more nuance to that story. And it lowers HDL, good cholesterol, and it does promote heart disease. And where is trans fats primarily found? Well, whenever we look into a nutrition label and we see something that says a partially hydrogenated oil, these are primarily what trans fats go under the name of on these labels. We want to look out for that. A lot of peanut butters have these partially hydrogenated oils in them, a lot of baked goods, certain kinds of chips and stuff like that. So we absolutely want to look out for trans fats. There's really no room in a healthy diet for having trans fats. They're plainly not good for you. Next is cholesterol. And cholesterol is only derived, it's a particular kind of fat that's only derived from animal sources. So if it's a plant-based product, it could be very high in fat, like an avocado, for example, but it will have 0 cholesterol. Important to note. And then we have sodium, carbohydrates. So sodium is something that there has been a big war on salt. There are certain people who have blood pressure that's sensitive to salt, but for the vast majority of people, salt is not as big of a concern as certain other things on here like sugar and trans fats, as long as you're drinking enough water. But you will see when we get into some of these more processed foods, like this pizza here has over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So you eat one pizza, you're getting well over, around 50% of your daily sodium intake based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So processed foods tend to be high in sodium, fruits, vegetables, lean meat, stuff like that, not as much. So important to note. And then we get into the carbohydrates. They're going to break that down into the number of carbohydrates and then the amount of fiber and the amount of sugar. We've heard the story, just like trans fats, that sugar is not good for us. It raises our blood sugar, can lead to weight gain, can cause energy crashes, and is very addictive. So we want to eat a diet that's lower in sugar. But it's not just all sugar, it's particularly added sugars. And we see here on the nutrition label, they give you the total sugars and then they show you added sugars. So let's go to a different product that has some of that stuff here. So here we have a microwavable dinner. From the ingredients, we look at this, we see it's mostly cooked pasta, all the thing that's in that pasta. And then it has a bunch of other stuff like some cooked chicken and a lot of preservatives that we see down here, etc. So when we're in the carbohydrate section, we see there's 36 grams of total carbs. Of those 36 grams, 4 of those carbohydrates are dietary fiber. We want more dietary fiber, good for our digestive health, good for lowering cholesterol, a lot of good things from fiber. We see that there are 6 naturally occurring sugars, probably from the tomato paste here. Tomatoes naturally have some sugar in them. And there's 3 added sugars. They've added these in through something in here that is just straight up added sugar. You can see it right down here in the label. Sugar, that's added here. And I want to really contrast this to something like wild blueberries. This is 1 cup of blueberries, 80 calories. We look down to ingredients, it doesn't have them because it's just blueberries. And here underneath the carbohydrates, we can see that a cup of blueberries has 19 grams of carbohydrates. 6 of those is fiber, so that's pretty good. That's 1/3 of those is fiber, very nice. And 10 of those carbohydrates in here are sugars right here, and there's 0 added sugars. No added sugars to a natural blueberry. So that's important to note. But there's some labels that are a little deceptive that don't actually say that they have sugar on them, but aren't great for you. And let me find a label right here that illustrates that point. Where are we at? Here. So this is 2 slices of white bread, 160 calories, so 80 calories per slice. And you look here and it doesn't look like it has a lot of sugar. It's got 30 grams of carbohydrates, Not a lot of fiber because white bread, again, they get rid of that bran layer that has all the fiber, so very little fiber, and it only has 2 grams of sugar. But the problem is, even though it doesn't say it has a lot of sugar, when white bread gets broken down very quickly by the body, these carbohydrates that are not listed as sugar essentially act as sugar in the body. And this is why it's so essential to not just look at the nutrition label itself and be like, oh yeah, white bread has low in sugar. You also need to understand what the ingredients are in that particular food, and enriched wheat flour basically acts as sugar in the body anyway, so this will be quickly converted to sugar, not the best food option. So let's carry on to the nutrition label look. So we looked at the carbohydrates, they break out the dietary fiber, some break out total sugars, some added sugars, and finally down here we have protein. Protein is something that you likely do want good amounts of in your diet, right? Because it increases your metabolism, it lowers your hunger levels, it's good for recovering from exercise, and a lot of healthy foods do have some protein in there. And again, the amount of protein they list here is based off of servings. So there's 16 grams per serving, and there's 3 servings here, so 16 times 3 is the amount of protein that is in here. And below in the nutrition label, they talk about the vitamins and minerals. These are micronutrients. We need them in smaller amounts, and they'll list those here. These are not as important to focus on, believe it or not, in a particular food. It's much more important to focus on eating high quality foods, fruits, vegetables. These kind of things will actually get your micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals faster than you looking at here saying like, how can I combine this 1/3 slice of pizza with that 1 slice of white bread to meet my needs for my vitamin C or something like that. Okay, let's go through a couple more of these labels to cover some other things. This is a microwavable dinner, and let's evaluate it based on what we've covered so far. So we can see the good thing about this is it says it's 390 calories, and there's 1 serving per container, so no deceptive marketing here. What you see is basically what you get. So it's got 8 grams of fat, 1.5 of that is saturated fat, 0 grams of trans fat. So that checks out pretty good, looking pretty nice. Sometimes you'll see that they list out these different types of fats, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. These are just different kinds of fats. By and large, healthy for you. They're unsaturated fats, and there's different nuances with the types of poly and monounsaturated fats. We're not going to get into that in this video. Overall, fine in the amounts that they're in here. Cholesterol, you can see 25 milligrams. This is because some of the fat in here is probably coming from cheese or something that is an animal product. Something I do see with these microwavable dinners that is worth noting is there's 550 milligrams of sodium. As we mentioned, salt is not going to kill you, especially if you're active with exercise and drinking enough water, but it is worth noting this is quite a bit of sodium, and oftentimes some of these frozen products and microwavable dinners and processed meats are very high in sodium. And then we can see that probably the biggest problem with this dinner is there's 22 grams of sugar, and 18 of these are from added sugars, and it's because this is some sweet and sour chicken. It likely has some kind of high fructose corn syrup, honey sauce, or teriyaki or something on it. So this is probably not a great choice, considering this is about a half a can of soda worth of sugar for 12 grams of protein. So that is a way to look at that on this label. Let's keep on going to a couple other examples. Slim Jims. I think this is a really funny example because this is why you want to look at the ingredients. If you look at the ingredients here, what is in a smoked Slim Jim? Well, first ingredient is beef, next thing is pork, and third thing, I kid you not, is mechanically separated chicken, and then we have some water, some textured soy flour, which is likely GMO soy, with corn syrup, salt, and a bunch of preservatives. So that is what is in a Slim Jim, and you can see kind of here on the nutrition label. But again, this is important to look at because some of these things might not be things you necessarily want to put in your body. Let's look at a couple other examples. There are some nutrition labels on things like bars, protein bars, and snack foods like this that have a nutrition label that's laid out in a more horizontal fashion. So same information, just kind of laid out in a slightly different way. Ingredients will be below. So serving size, 2 of these little bars. So that's good because each of these little bars actually has 110 calories. But what we see here is for 2 bars. So you can see all that. They give you the added sugars, the total sugars. And when I evaluate something like a snack and a protein bar, I definitely don't like to see a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to protein. So there's 8 grams of protein here and 10 grams of sugar. Not a great ratio. Typically you like to see a 1-to-2 ratio at the very minimum. So for every 1 gram of sugar, there's 2 grams of protein, but that's often not the case with these kinds of foods. But that being said, only 220 calories, not a huge calorie hit, so that's something to look at. Couple other things here. Some of these products that do say, they're organic, marketed as healthy, gluten-free, wheat-free, you want to come down here, look at the ingredients, and you can see that most of the ingredients are organic. They'll list them if they're organic. This thing happens to be mostly whole grain rice, whole grain quinoa, brown flax seeds, organic sesame seeds, filtered water, sea salt, soy sauce. So not a lot of ingredients in here, so that is good when you look at something that doesn't have a ton of ingredients in this. And if we compare and contrast that to something like this ingredient label is a lot bigger than this one here. And as by and large, I do subscribe to that Michael Pollan rule. The more unprocessed the food, likely the better it is for us. So this is actually a fairly decent cracker by there, and it is one package is one serving, so that's good, not too deceptive. So let's look into some breads again. We have breads, and this is why you also want to necessarily look at you do want to look at the ingredients, because this bread here is enriched wheat flour. So basically they stripped out, because it's white bread, they stripped out that bran layer and then they added in some vitamins. So what is in enriched wheat flour? Flour, malted barley flour, and then they added in some iron, some niacin, some thiamine, some riboflavin, some folic acid. So some of these B vitamins. This is very common. You see this in breakfast cereals that say fortified or enriched. Basically what they did is they used low quality grain products that strip out the vitamins, so they have to re-add them in after the fact. That's what you see there. Oftentimes you'll see high fructose corn syrup, not great. And certainly a lot of these things like soybean oil is a pretty crappy, low quality oil, has some bad fats in it, and then you have lots of preservatives that you don't necessarily want. And then there's wheat gluten in here and potassium iodate, which is something that is linked to some adverse health effects. So this is why the nutrition label in terms of calories is not all the whole picture. You got to look at the ingredients too. And I want to bring up a bread like Ezekiel bread, which is much better. This is a bread we recommend to our Fit Father and Fit Mother Project program members. It's sprouted, it's a lot healthier. You look at the ingredients list for Ezekiel bread, it's much shorter. Organic sprouted wheat, some filtered water, organic sprouted barley, millet, barley, lentils, sprouted soybeans, organic spelt, fresh yeast, organic wheat gluten, sea salt. So a lot more simple and not some of these preservatives in there. So these are some considerations when looking at nutrition labels. Again, to kind of recap this video, look at the ingredients and look at the calories first. And then you can go down through the proteins, the carbs, and fats. Ideally, you want something that has 0 grams of trans fat, so watch out for those partially hydrogenated oils. You'll find those often in mayonnaise and some other like fat substitute products like margarines. And then you want something that is ideally low in sugar, particularly low in added sugar. And just because it doesn't have sugar on the label, if it's something like white bread, it actually interacts with your body like it is sugar after it's broken down and digested very quickly. So these are the things to look for, and I guess the message here is that ingredient quality matters just as much as calories too. You can lose weight in a McDonald's diet, but over the long haul, you're gonna be a lot healthier if you're eating non-processed food. So hope you found this valuable. If you actually want like a step-by-step guide on what you should eat every single day to feel energetic, to build muscle, to lose fat, then scroll below in the description. And if you're a man, get our 1-day weight loss meal plan for guys. And if you're a mother, get our free Fit Mom Jumpstart that gives you our meal plan and our workouts. We'll send both those things straight to your email. So those are in the description. Hope you found this valuable, my friend. Start paying a little more attention to your foods. Look at those labels. And again, the best foods of all don't require labels. An apple's an apple, salmon's salmon. I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. I'll see you around the channel, my friend. Check out those free resources below. If you like this, give us a thumbs up. It really helps this video spread around YouTube and the internet, and it helps our channel a lot, so thankful for that. Please hit the thumbs up, drop a comment below, and I'll see you around our channel, my friend, and I'll talk to you very soon.
FitFatherProject.com